Well, joining us now in studio is Representative Tip McGuire from the Joint Finance Committee. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're going to start basically with this question. What was this process like from your standpoint this year?
Well, I'll say, one of the really inspiring things about how the whole budget process has been for me was it started with Governor Evers touring the state. He had his listening sessions to go around the state and hear from people what they wanted to see in the budget. And then he brought before the legislature a budget that reflected what he had heard. And then as a committee, the Joint Finance members, we also went around the state and we had listening sessions. We weren't allowed to talk. We just sat there for 8 hours or 9 hours and listened to people come forward and talk about the things that they wanted to see from their budget. And from my perspective, what we heard from people across the state of Wisconsin affirmed the decisions that Governor Evers had made in his budget initially. And I was disappointed, frankly, to see some of those things weren't included in the final budget.
I'm going to get to some of those in a minute, but What's it like being the minority party on that finance committee?
Well, it's a little interesting. I think a lot of time you're sort of the megaphone for the ideas of your party, or you're seen in that light, and so you have to kind of argue on everything. You can't really pick and choose the issues that you want to talk about. But really, it's also a wonderful experience to get to know all of the different things that are funded in our state budget and all the different programs and all the things that are going on. And while it's disappointing that we don't win as many motions as we should, I still think that the process has been very informative and quite a learning experience for me.
Talking about some of the specifics of this whole budget plan, tax cuts obviously were one of the big question marks of what was going to happen there. Now, Republicans say it's across the board tax cuts. They're focusing on how much the middle classes are going to save. I'm guessing you're dwelling a little bit more on that upper income tax bracket. What do you pick out that you maybe dislike from the tax cut plan?
Well, so I want to be clear here. When they say that everyone gets a tax cut, that's true. They cut, at some point in there, they cut the lowest bracket, and that impacts everybody from the lowest bracket to the top bracket, right? But in reality, and you can look at the information from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, 73% of Wisconsinites earn less than $100,000. That 73% of Wisconsinites get less than 20% of this tax cut. So that means the top 27% get over 80% of this tax cut. And we know that 11 taxpayers, the 11 wealthiest people in the state of Wisconsin, each get $1.8 million back at the very least. And so, but for me, I just want to emphasize that it's not really so much just the tax cut, it's that what we lost by cutting taxes for the very wealthy. If we had simply kept the tax cut without putting in that top bracket tax cut that cuts $1.8 million for the 11 wealthiest people in the state, if we hadn't made that change at the top bracket, we could still be able to pay for child care accounts. We could be able to pay for postpartum coverage for new mothers. We could be able to pay for additional staffing at the Office of School Safety to ensure that that students and families could feel safe about their schools. There's so many programs, homeless veterans that were removed from the budget. There's so many programs that we could have afforded, not by removing the tax cut as a whole, but just by removing the part that only benefited the top earners in the state. Everybody still would have gotten a tax cut under that, except, under the way Republicans did it, they instead spent all of this money giving the wealthiest people in Wisconsin additional tax benefits that made the tax cut disproportionately affect the wealthy, and didn't invest in things that regular families are looking for.
Their counter argument is that top rate is still going to be higher than most of the states around us and that we have to be competitive. Do you not agree with that concept?
Well, look, I think one of the things that we've been talking about this whole session has been a workforce shortage, right? And we want to be able to attract working people to Wisconsin to make sure that we have people to fill all the jobs that we have opening and help businesses thrive and expand. And so I guess I don't understand. They don't want to put in place the programs that would help working people and make it so that this is a state where regular, everyday people can succeed, but they're concerned about making it more attractive for billionaires. That sounds like that's their plan. I don't know that solves our workforce problem. I think what we really need to do is make this a state where people can raise their families, where people can feel like if I have a child there, that I can still go to work. And I don't have to stay home with my kid because I'll have affordable and accessible childcare. I think that we should make it a state where people know that they'll have access to health insurance, and so they and their families can grow up healthy. We should make it a state where people know that we have our crown jewel, the UW system, is being funded so that their children have the opportunity to have the skills that they need to be successful. I guess I don't understand. If their message is that they are picking millionaires and billionaires over working people, I guess I'll say I see that they're doing that too, but I don't think it's right.
Big question now is, what will the governor do? What do you want to see the governor do? What would you tell the governor to do right now? Would you have him sign this?
Well, look, I think that, obviously I voted no. I think that this budget is incomplete. That doesn't mean that there aren't things in this budget that I voted for in committee, right? I'm sure if you're following the budget process, we voted for some of the housing dollars. I voted for shared revenue dollars. I voted for a couple of different provisions that came through in the budget. But the budget is incomplete without the things that we have heard time and again from families across the state. I think about all of the parents and employers and providers and members of law enforcement that have reached out and told us that we absolutely need to be funding childcare. It's absolutely incomprehensible to me that we are not funding this program that everyone says is essential for our economic growth. And so I think the budget is incomplete. Any way that the governor can help make it more complete, I think would be better. I think it's a true shame that we have chosen to not fund something that working people and employers and providers and law enforcement has been asking for, and instead we gave a tax cut to the very wealthy.
So you're hinting partial veto would be more your line of thinking if you were to invite the governor to do one thing or another? Because it sounds like there's things within this budget that you're saying are okay.
Yeah, I don't think that every line in it is bad or something like that. I think that there is a tremendous failure to do the things that are absolutely necessary, and in a time of surplus. I really want to emphasize that, because this isn't like one of those budgets where it's like, well, we had to pick between two things because we didn't have enough money. We had the money, we just gave it to rich people instead of helping working people, and that disappoints me. And I think with such clear messages from working men and women, from employers, from parents, from providers, from law enforcement on the importance of childcare, how could we ignore that? And so I'm hopeful that the governor can do whatever he can to make those priorities align again with what this process. We started off by talking about the process. What this process started with. It started with the governor traveling the state and asking people, "What do you need?" And people said all of these things. And then Joint Finance traveled the state and said, "We're here to listen. What do you need?" And then we didn't do those things. We didn't do childcare. And the one thing that I don't think I heard anywhere that I went is the thing that we ended up doing, which is I never heard once, not from one person on the listening tour, not one person said, "I think we need to give the 11 wealthiest people in the state a big tax cut." Not one person said that to me. But a lot of people said, "I would love it if you could assist the homeless veterans in our community. I would love it if you could help families with childcare. I would love it if you could help make sure that providers can continue to make sure they have the capacity to allow childcare. I would love it if you could help make sure people have health insurance." That's what people said. Nobody said, 11 richest people in the state, they must be really struggling. Nobody told me that.
Representative Tip McGuire, thanks for the time here this week.
My pleasure.